All right, how we doing today? To all the viewers out there, I want to welcome you to this podcast. This is something that for many of you that know me and my background, I don't really care to be in the newspapers, on TV, on social media. But we're living in a time right now where things have to change. We feel we have to educate people. So this is why we're doing this podcast. My name is Maryann Bernal. I am a candidate for Congress in the 29th Congressional District. But we want to talk today about a little bit of the history of the politics and where the San Fernando Valley politics has gone in the city of Los Angeles. I want to introduce a couple of guests we have here today. So to my left, you're going to see is my wife, Maryann Bernal.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
Okay, and here you go. In front of me, we have the one and only, the man, the myth, the godfather, Mr. David Hernandez.
Well, thank you, Benny. And it's nice to be here. You know, as we kick this off, it's really exciting to be at the beginning of an endeavor such as this. So congratulations.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And you've been a big part of this, David, you know, going way back when. I mean, we probably met, 20 years ago in early 2000, 23 years ago. And that's kind of what I want to just kind of lay out here is I want people to understand, because when people think about a Republican, people think of a blonde, blue-eyed guy or woman, you know, with people with money.
I think there's anything wrong with that.
No, and there's not. You know, there definitely is not. And we'll touch on that when we get into the secession movement.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, I was born and raised in a Catholic family, Democrats. I was always a conservative Democrat. My parents, people label us kind of like Kennedy, Reagan Democrats, even though Reagan was a Republican. But you know, that's kind of the values that we stand on. But you know, throughout the years, growing up in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, growing up at Pacoima, the projects, and then moving on the other side of the freeway, Arleta, still 91331, you know, there's a certain lifestyle that you experience. And, you know, growing up as a young boy, picking cucumbers in Stockton, Lodi, Modesto at age 6, you know, interesting story. My father would always wait till the last day of school. Or if we were playing baseball, we usually made it to the playoffs. He would wait until the last game. And then he would load up the truck or the station wagon. We'd jump in and we'd all go over to Stockton, Lodi, Modesto to pick cucumbers. We did that every summer. Why? Because we were poor. We had to put food on the table. We had to keep a roof over our head. We were helping our parents. Some people may say, hey, that was child labor. No, it wasn't. This is how we do things. This is something that our parents instilled in us when we were young. Work hard. You know, you don't walk around this country. You don't come to the United States with your hand out asking for people to give you. Although there are some places that you can go, something that the government may offer you where you can get assistance when you need it, it's not something you want to live off of. So growing up, once again, in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, what we had a group of leaders, a group of us going back, let's say probably 24 years ago. And we always blamed, excuse my language here, but we always blamed the white man for our failures. We were indoctrinated with that growing up in the Metcalf movement, growing up in the Chicano movement. It's something that was always instilled in us. But as you grew older, you had your own family, your own home, you had to pay bills, pay taxes, you started to see things a little different. So what we decided was, we go way back into the 24 years ago, is we decided, okay, guys, so we as Democrats, here we are always blaming another race for the failures of our communities, the gang violence, the teenage dropout, the teenage pregnancy, illegal migration. Yes, illegal migration. As Democrats, 24 years ago, we were fighting against that as well, because it was affecting first and second generation Americans who were also trying to live the American dream. And then the abuse in the welfare system. Why? Because it was pretty much destroying the nuclear family that as we know it, that has been handed out to generation and generation. So we decided, hey guys, look, let's build our own Latino political machine, you know, and the purpose of that was to kind of address them 5 issues that I just shared with you. It was a 24-year plan. We're going to run for every level of government, whether it be city council. We started in the school, in the commissioners, city council, state assembly, Congress, the Senate, and then eventually the presidency in 2028. Keep that in mind because it's right around the corner. So years go by. Here we are. These things happen. You know, we have everybody in place. About 4 years go by. We have a private meeting. And in this private meeting, what we have is a group of all these leaders, and we're going to put up a picture right now of the leaders that we're talking about. There's a group of leaders who are known as a Latino political machine. I was a part of that, so you have that on the screen there. These are the leaders that were pretty much up on the top row. Let's go to the other picture. There's another one with the San Fernando here. So this picture here, this is the San Fernando Valley, what we call the Latino political machine, which started with James Acevedo. That was a gentleman, he's a lobbyist and a developer that pretty much controls all the politicians down below. My picture is not in there. My picture should have been right here in the middle. And the reason why it's not is because 4 or 5 years after I realized what their real agenda was, I walked away from the machine. So that's why you don't have my picture there in the middle. So here's a question I asked them. I said, gentlemen, we had a plan to build our own Latino political machine because we were going to address these 5 issues. I go, but yet we have our own people elected to every level of government other than the presidency, and things have gotten worse in our community. What is the reason for that? None of them would look at me. And the one man that controls them all, he's the one that says, well, Benny, let me ask you 3 questions. He says, if we solve all these issues that you're talking about, number 1 is, what issues will our candidates run on the next time they run for office? Number 2, do you realize how much money comes into our city and our states because of the problems we're dealing with? Nonprofit organizations and such, right? And number 3, because I was a union vice president for SEIU Local 99, do you realize how many jobs it creates? So I'm looking at them like, are you serious? So what you're telling me is we're going to pretty much exploit the sufferings of our community. We're going to benefit off of the suffering of our kids killing each other, our young girls dropping out of school, getting pregnant, ending up on the welfare system because there's money to be made, there's jobs to be created. Are you serious? That's the mentality of the Latino political machine. And like I always tell people, don't take my word for it. I used to tell people for years, get involved with them, work with them, volunteer on their campaigns, do whatever you have to do, and you will see their true colors. Today, people are finally seeing their true colors.
It took a long time.
It did, Maryann, and it's a matter of everything is about God's time.
Yes.
So here's the interesting thing. So we got this powerful machine in place, right? Supposed to be helping the Latino, the Hispanic community. What is it doing? It's burying it. It's making money off of it.
Yes.
So we had an issue with my family and I, we use sports as a means to keep kids out of gangs. We've been doing it for 40 years and 98% success rate. We train them at the highest level, and then we compete in front of D1 and D2 schools where they get either a 60%, scholarship or 80%, and then it comes in with their academics. We're involved with their schools, with their counselors, if they need tutoring. So a 98% success rate. And what I want to tie into that, we'll get back to that after, is many of these kids over the years, we've asked them, go on to your trade, whatever you're going to do, whatever higher education you want, your career, but never forget the community. Always remember where you came from. So if you have the opportunity to take a job as a high school coach, as a mentor, as a teacher, law enforcement, fire department, come back to our communities.
Yes.
Well, guess what? That was happening. That was going on for many, many years where our kids, many of them, those that you see in law enforcement today, those that you see that are part of the fire department are coaches. Like Ray Rivera was one of the kids that we mentored going back at Sylmar High School. Congratulations, Ray Rivera. You won the championship last year, Sylmar High School. Kudos to you, brother. He's an example of what we do. And if you ever go watch Ray Rivera at Sylmar High School and you watch how he treats his players, he's like a father figure to many of these young men because that's what we instilled in all of the people that we mentored were growing up. Be part of the family, be a part of it. So moving up along, going through this process, we have our political leaders in place, and we were dealing with some issues with the youth in some fields. So who do I go to? I go to the people that I know, right? To ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Did any of them raise their hand to help? Absolutely not. But one man did. One man who I did not know.
Ooh.
And that man was David Hernandez.
Wow.
David Hernandez was a man that and there was another gentleman by the name of Jim Leahy, approached me, hey, what is it that you need? How can we help out? Never talked about political party or affiliation, but this is where I met David Hernandez. And, we started to build a relationship, some friendship. We've been friends ever since. And eventually throughout the years is when we figured out what party we were a part of.
Yes.
So, and it's funny because with what was instilled in our minds back in them days, if somebody told me you're a Republican, oh, what? You're not supposed to be helping me. Like, wait a minute, you're the evil guy,
Mm-hmm.
But here was a Republican who wasn't even pushing his political affiliation, who just said, "What do you need? And I will help you."
Right.
Now, you have David Hernandez. Does he have blonde hair? Does he have blue eyes? Is this your typical Republican that we all kind of thought
No.
a Republican looked
Right.
like?
Right.
Right?
Well, if you ask some, I'm all of that on the inside. They call that a coconut.
Yeah, and we went through a lot of that, David, and so I kind of just want to give you guys a little bit of a background of why the machine was built, what was its purpose, it was supposed to do, the outcome that we were achieving, obviously that has failed tremendously, how I made the connection with David Hernandez, because eventually, back then I was a Democrat, a conservative Democrat, a part of the leadership, an organizer, a strategist, especially with the unions. And it's funny because even when I was a Democrat in the unions, because of my issues, even the union leadership, I remember his name was Bill Lloyd. He was Governor Davis's right-hand man. He was telling everybody I was a Republican, just because of my issues. And it's like, okay, wait a minute.
It's
so
amazing.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of conservative Democrats. I think even when I was younger, I've always been a registered independent, but I think I was always a conservative. But I voted all Democrat back then. But when you first mentioned this story to me, I thought it was so unbelievable that we had all these, our people in place in high political positions, and to kind of see what they did and what they're still doing currently. It's just, I have to say, it's very shameful. It's shameful, as a mother and a grandmother, to see not only are they are agreeing to all this indoctrination, this transitioning with the kids, starting as young as 4 years old. That's why, to me, I feel like I have to start opening my mouth. I have to start getting involved. I can't sit back as a mother and a grandmother and pretend this stuff isn't happening. And it's just so, I guess, shameful to see that these Hispanics, they grew up in our neighborhood. They're our friends, our neighbors, and this is what they're doing to our children and grandchildren.
And, not only to our children or grandchildren, but if you look at the generational morals and values that we were raised on, these politicians are running under the Catholic flag, under the Christian flag. They're very supposed to be faith-based.
Yes.
But yet, if you look at their legislation, it goes against everything our abuelitos and abuelitas, our parents raised us to believe. All them core values, the godly values that we embrace, that make this community, this state, this world a better place. These are the people, our own people, brown skin, who were destroying that. David, you want to any input in this so far?
Well, but, never being involved in politics before, it was all going to different community meetings was just basically to learn what was taking place in the community, what areas they could be of service, whether it was the foundation board at Mission College in Selmar.
Yes.
I mean, I volunteered to be on the board.
That's
there.
where I met you.
And, I eventually became president of the foundation. And it was funny because the preconceived notions about Republicans that, I had served in that board for 4 years before I became president for a year. And so that's a community college. So technically it's like a two-year course. So the turnover of students was really high. And you had the different metric groups and the groups like that. Yet when they, and they would be there for 6 months or maybe 2 years if they were lucky. But when they found out there was a Republican as chairman of the foundation board, they went to great lengths to try to get me to resign because I was Republican.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we had at that school there, because that school, when I started, that school was pretty poor.
Yes.
This is before all of the big bond measures.
Yes.
And so, we were doing a lot to raising monies, especially for the AB 540 students. And what people don't know what that is those are the individuals that are in the country without documents who were attending Mission College and were applying for scholarships and financial assistance. And as chairman or president of the foundation, I'm the one signing the front of the checks.
Wow.
And so here you had these activists that, blow into Mission College, and all of a sudden they want to make a name for themselves and try and take out the individual that's been signing the front of the check for all these AB 540 students for years.
So let me ask you a question. Were you hurting these individuals by signing that?
No, because the reality, here's the reality is when I accepted that position, or first volunteered as a board member and then was elected as president, I stepped up to fulfill the requirements of that position.
Yes.
I didn't have any other political agenda. Unfortunately, what we see today is we have so many other individuals that get involved in organizations and programs, and yet it's there to further a different agenda than why they're there.
Yes.
You can see that in dealing with the homeless in Los Angeles. You can see that today with all of the universities, the agitators, and the things that people that are there. Is if they would focus on what they volunteered for, or even many being paid for, a lot of these challenges would be addressed in a lot better manner and a lot sooner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so much for inclusivity, right? Instead of embracing you because you're Hispanic and saying, wow, one of our own is in a higher position, and instead of embracing you because you didn't follow their I guess, agenda, they felt the need to sort of pull you down, which is kind of really a shame in a way. And it's so unfortunate what's happening to the colleges, and not just the colleges, it's just the regular schools, whether it's elementary, junior high, or high school. This agenda has been going on for a long time, and you can see by what's happening in the colleges, just everything that's happening with these protests. It's really shocking and surprising the amount of money and the many years that went into the indoctrination of our kids. So
you talked about the protests, and that's an interesting point. So here you have three or four of the top Latino political leaders who all went to MIT, who run under the banner of Catholicism or Christianity, who say they stand with Israel, but yet none of them have spoken up publicly about what's taking place, the protests, pro-Palestinian protests that's taking place at the campuses, especially at MIT.
they haven't denounced the protesters that are going on, the protests that are going on everywhere, and it's happening everywhere. So they should be denouncing it if they truly feel the way. If they're really pro-Israel, you should be denouncing it. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. What is your real position on this?
Yes.
And you mentioned going back to Mission College. Yes, there was times way back when the Chicano movement, the Hispanics, we were dealing with a lot of issues. But you know what? By the leaders today continuing to push this, you're literally spitting on the graves of the individuals that you hold up high that have worked their butt off, worked their tails off to get us to where we're at. You can't compare where we're at today to where we were, let's say, 40 years ago. Yeah. A lot has happened. We've come a long way.
Yes.
But they keep repeating it. They keep trying to brainwash the younger generations. And what is it for? To create division, and that's the sad part about it. So let's go back now to the Latino political machine, right? So you have the development of this machine. People are in positions of power. And then you have this, the Valley seeking its independence. Remember that, Valley was seeking its independence. On that board, what it was is, for those of you who don't know, is it was the San Fernando Valley who wanted to separate from the city of Los Angeles. One of the reasons why, the big reason why, is because the taxpayers in the San Fernando Valley felt they weren't getting their fair share. Correct, David?
Right.
That was one of the big issues.
They were paying a lot of taxes, but weren't getting the return in services.
Exactly. Whether it be the city infrastructure, police department, fire department, whatever it may be. So you had the secession movement that was seeking independence, Valley Vote that was seeking its independence. I was a Democrat back then. I was a part of the union leadership, and I remember Alex Padilla, Tony Cardenas, Richard Lararcon, pretty much all of them were on the executive board with us. David was also an executive board member. Didn't know David too well back then. And it's funny because we had the Democratic Party and the unions who approached every one of us individually and said, if you don't remove yourselves from this executive board, you will never get our endorsements or support.
Wow.
So guess what happened at the next meeting?
What?
David and I were probably the only Hispanics there at the table, you know? And then, Mike Trujillo. Mike Trujillo was younger back then as well, and he was on board as well. But pretty much all the brown faces were removed. Why? Because they cared more about the support of the Democratic Party, the support of the unions, versus fighting for the rights of the people they represent.
Yeah, they cared more about their political future than the people that they wanted to represent.
Exactly. And, here is a kind of a clipping of an article of a newspaper that was put out, and you can see them, they're talking about secession. No more lies. Secession will hurt Latinos. Think about that.
Well, you can tell that's an old picture because Alex Padilla has his arm around Richard Ellicott. That would never happen today.
Not today, And for those of you, and we'll get into it as we move forward to the other podcast. We'll give you more of the history of why those arms don't wrap around each other anymore. There's a lot of reasons for a lot that goes on behind the scenes. But yeah, it's sad because these individuals, we held them very high. We had a lot of hope that they were going to be the change for the Northeast San Fernando Valley, and then spread out throughout the city, spread out throughout the state of California, eventually spread out throughout the nation, giving us a fair playing ground. And all they did was pretty much just push us backwards, playing the race card. At the end of the day, these are the gentlemen responsible for lying to our community. All we've ever shared is truth about what was taking place. And even in the secession movement where people wanted smaller government, that's where the neighborhood councils came out. We're going to have local town hall meetings, give people smaller council districts, give people a voice, somewhere where they can be heard and they can be part of a change.
Yeah, they call that local control.
Exactly.
As the way it should be that way. It should be grassroots. Everything should be grassroots. And what happens is, all these individuals, they get their degrees, they get educated, they become elitist, and they're no longer grassroots. And so that's the issue is they can no longer relate to the regular person anymore, the blue collar person. I mean, they always used to say Republicans were white collar. They were for the corporations. They were for the rich. But really, it has changed now, right? Now it's the opposite way away. It's the Republicans are for the blue collar. The Democrats are more for the corporates. You just look at look at Amazon. You look at Google. You look at what is the other one? Oh God, I can't remember. Yeah, but there's so many of them. There's just so many of them on Facebook. I mean, look at these are all big corp, right?
Yeah.
And so they basically are in charge of everything. They have the resources, the money, to be able to put behind all these protesters.
They got the Democratic Party, the unions.
Oh, the unions. They're funneling money left and right. Yeah. And these people that were raised with us, our parents know their parents, we were friends, went to the same school, and now no longer are they for the grassroots anymore. And it kind of almost doesn't matter what party in a way. It's very unfortunate what's happening left and right. It doesn't matter. It's really the grassroots against the elitists. That's what I'm seeing, or the global elitists, if you want to say. Also, in addition,
here's a hard point on that though, Maryann. This is what we're dealing with, and this is why David Hernandez, what he's doing with the positions he's in now, is key.
Yes.
It's key not just for Republicans.
Yes.
It's also going to support and help Democrats. It's going to support people who are in the situation that we're in, because there are people right now, as we're running for office, who will call you and they want to drop large amounts of money on your campaign. But we do research to make sure where that money is coming from. That money, we want to make sure it's not tied into anything we don't agree with. So the majority of that big money coming in is usually tied into something we don't agree with. So we're grassroots. Yes. Then you have the media, whether it be the newspapers or whether it be something you're watching on TV, they give us no coverage, none whatsoever. They do an interview for an hour and they'll put maybe 20 seconds of something that they spin as a negative. They're called the spin masters.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is a sad part about it. So it makes it hard for the grassroots. And David, if you want to talk briefly about how it is that the plan that you put together that is helping grassroots candidates right now.
Well, my first entry in politics wasn't until 2002. So that was, 22 years ago. And now I'm 75. So if you do the math, I spent a lot of years on this planet without ever getting involved in politics. And when my neighbor asked, well, how come there's never a Republican to vote for Congress? and where we lived, and I hadn't even thought about it. That's how uninvolved I was. I was involved in local stuff with nonprofits, like I said, Mission College. I sat on the board called Youth Services Network. We had 3 homes for boys ages 8 through 18 that had come from the county social services system. I worked with a couple of gentlemen that were gay and were dying of AIDS. And
okay, you were a Republican during this time?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make that clear so people understand.
Yeah, I was the elephant in the room.
There it is. There it is.
And so I was doing all that stuff. I would make weekly trips to MacArthur Park with clothing and food to the homeless that were there around the park. And so that was just it just seemed like the right thing to do.
Yes.
And so when I found out that no Republican had run for Congress in 10 years.
Wow.
In the area where I lived. I mean, you had one congressman, and he had been there. No one ever challenged him, and it was something because his district included what is now the 29th district. This is before redistricting.
That's my district now.
So you had these individuals up here on the screen were supporting him.
Yes,
because he was he was the big dog.
Who was it? I'm curious.
Howard Berman. Howard Berman, and so Tony and Alex and all of them supported him.
I remember.
They were turning out the Latino vote for Howard Berman.
Except for one person didn't support him.
He's a white man?
Jewish man.
Oh, Jewish man. Okay. I'm just curious.
And so, for me to challenge him, it was like, well, they didn't take that serious. It's like, who are you? And so I ran in 2002. And back then you had to be a Republican in order to get on the ballot. With signatures or finances. And a Republican club reached out and says, hey, we see that you've signed up to run for Congress. How's it going? And I said, well, it's not. I mean, to try and collect 3,000 signatures in a short period of time in a district that is predominantly Democrat. So they said, well, if you're not crazy, we'll pay your filing fee. And, I should have figured I must be crazy if they're willing to do it. Something's wrong here.
I think I'm crazy doing it too. But
and so I was the Republican nominee against Howard Berman in 2002. And the party leadership, they were very appreciative, but said, we're not going to help you.
There was no financial support.
No, we're not going to help you and you're not going to win. But you're going to do, if by chance you win, you're going to do what our friends, the lobbyists, tell you to do, or we'll run somebody against you.
Bring it on.
And I thought, well, what? This is my idea. They didn't ask me, so this may be the way it is. And
that's
so
why I love this man.
I ran in 2004 because I had committed, because they had said, we would like you to commit to run for 2 terms because you're gonna develop relationships, you're gonna learn how the system works. And so in 2004, I ran again. But this time it was a little different because, the illegal immigration was at its peak. I mean, nothing like today. I mean, 2004
right
illegal immigration would
it's
be
just so crazy now.
would be a dream. But since Howard Berman was Jewish and his synagogue was in the district, the synagogue wanted a candidate for him. And so he could not turn them down. And so I was the first person he had to debate.
I remember that.
In 12 years at that time.
Wow.
So we were at his synagogue, and here he was standing up basically for open borders, and I was standing up for, control of the borders because the number of individuals that need and are desperate for help is unlimited, and the number of hours in a day and resources that we have is limited. And so since I had been involved in taking individuals to the county hospital for years and having to wait 7 or 8 hours in an emergency room with them, I knew, the county healthcare system was doing the best that it could under the circumstances. You can't keep pouring thousands and thousands of more individuals into those emergency rooms. And so I was the one, speaking for, controlled immigration and legal immigration. And so since then, I've stayed involved and have, with my last race, decided, well, I'm not going to run anymore for a partisan office or even a nonpartisan office. But what I will do is I will help individuals who would like to get involved, do not know what to do, are very susceptible to a lot of the unscrupulous consultants that are everywhere in both parties that are there willing to take their money, and when they're all said and done, just toss them under the bus. And so that was what we've been doing, is we've been helping individuals from all over run for office. And it was great because we started off by talking about the image of the Republican Party are rich white males, which throw in heterosexual. Boy, has that changed a lot. But the fact is, these candidates were, like a single mom, a former gang member, all tattooed out, running for state senate in Lincoln Heights in East L.A.
It's amazing.
And so then you have African Americans that are running. You have Salvadorians. You have all these different people of color that are running as
curious.
Republicans.
So you have the LAHRC. And you're
Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club.
Yes, and now I think a lot of people think it's only for Hispanics, but it is not. I mean, the first time Benny took me there, I mean, it's very mixed. There's people of all walks. It doesn't matter what. Correct. I mean, you will help anybody. You don't even necessarily have to be a Republican, I guess. But maybe a conservative.
There's certain values.
And that's what we share. It's really the values,
right?
Yeah.
Because family, faith, and opportunity.
Yes.
And you'll find individuals, regardless of party or no party preference,
talk about the elephant in the room, huh?
And that's why I designed it to be an independent Republican club, not chartered by the state party or by the county party.
Because they can't control you, right?
Right, they can't control me.
So you get to have more of a say of who you want to represent or who you want to help out.
Well,
I guess.
here was an example. There was when Benny was running for office as a Democrat. I was told I can't help him.
Wow. I remember that.
And but I said, but there's no Republican in the race. They said, well, it doesn't matter. I says, well, the same thing happened with Patty Lopez running for state assembly. No Republican in the race. Then I was told, you cannot help a Democrat run for office. And I said, listen, there's thousands and thousands of Republicans in the district. Someone's going to be the assembly member or the congressperson. I refuse to be irrelevant, and I refuse to not participate in a manner in which it would benefit the Republicans that are in the district. And so that's why we've remained independent. And so we have a certain amount of that.
It gives you a freedom. It gives you a freedom to work with and who you want, and that's the beauty of it. And I remember when you were running against Berman, that's when they began to label me as a coconut, as a sellout, because they all went behind Berman. I went behind you because I believe more in your values, and probably because their stories, when you listen to their stories are really my story, because they always talk about working in the fields, no, you didn't, save it, But here you have Cesar Chavez. So Cesar Chavez, even today, they're trying to change the history of what he's really known for. Chavez was against immigration. He was like, okay, wait a minute. This illegal immigration that's taking place here is affecting first and second generation American citizens.
Because he was a union organizer and leader. Yeah. And the growers were bringing in illegals to undermine the development of the union.
Well, let me share a personal story with you. So I'll give you an example of why he was against it. Two reasons why that I know of. Number one is, here we are, American citizens. People always say, who's going to do these jobs if we shut the borders?
Jobs that Americans won't do. Well,
it's like, really?
That's racist.
Exactly. But first and second generation, especially first and second generation Americans of Mexican descent, whatever descent they come from, these are the jobs that we look to help us build the foundation. So there will be plenty of people that will be willing to do it. Yes, it's hard labor, but so much has changed. Back then, you didn't have water, you didn't have food, you didn't have restrooms. All that has changed to make it better. But the interesting thing is that they're trying to change even the history of Cesar Chavez. But here's what happened is, number one is, because you had a bunch of illegal immigrants that were willing to do the job with us at a much lesser pay, so a bucket that we would fill of cucumbers, they would give us a ticket or click our tab that we had for 25 cents a bucket. So Chavez was saying, the work is worth at least 50 cents a bucket. So you're cutting 50% of what should be earning, taking back to our families. The second reason is because they never paid you cash that day. So like I said, they would give you a ticket. every 2 weeks, the owner or somebody would come in, and we call them mayordomos, would come in with the cash box, and you would give your tickets, and then they would pay you. But guess who would show up every time it was payday? Immigration. Immigration would show up, and you see people running everywhere. And I remember looking at my dad. Are we supposed to run? My dad said, we're okay. Like, we're okay. But this is why Chavez was opposed to it, and it happens today.
Yeah,
and
the abuse.
And it frustrates me when I hear my own gente saying, you know, we got to keep the borders open. There's people doing the work. Okay, but these are people who are also being abused. And we'll get more into detail in our next podcast as to the future. But David, what you're doing with the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club, what you're doing with your new position as you were recently elected as a Los Angeles County Regional Vice Chair for the Republican Party, correct?
Yeah, the state party. It's
the state party. You know, the things that you're doing, I've been working with you hand in hand. You are what we call, most people say the godfather, but you are the guy who is a grassroots godfather.
Yes.
You are the guy that doesn't tie into all the big monies, that you're not going to be pushed by the bullies. And over the years, people have learned to see that in you, and they respect that. They respect that because you're not a sellout. You're going to say what needs to be said. You and I didn't always agree, right?
Yeah.
We would drive, we drive for years, and okay, but wait, orderly. No, I don't see it that way, you know. But I would give him my explanation, and then he would give me his, and we walk out with a better perspective. You know, so it was like,
not
okay,
black and blue.
not black and blue, you know, never no punches.
You were still brown and brown.
Exactly. But you know what? You know, but back then you were able to have these conversations,
Yes.
agree to disagree. And you know what? Okay, let's shake hands. Let's go have lunch. Now we know when you have an issue and you know I don't agree with, don't call me. You know, but when we agree, call me. We'll be there to help. So David, what you've been doing with the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club, because I know we're running out of time, and what you're doing at the regional, I think it's amazing. I think the fact that you are willing to not go under the umbrella of a political party because they control you says a lot about who you are,
Yes.
says a lot about what you're trying to accomplish. And yes, when I was a Democrat running for Congress and they forced you to resign from a position, did they not?
Yeah, I was chairman of the assembly district.
Yeah. So they forced him to resign. This is a gentleman.
Well, they didn't
who-
force me. It was my choice.
Well, it was his choice, yeah.
They said you either resign or you stop helping him.
Yeah.
So
And-
I chose to resign.
Yeah, and David saw the bigger picture because being a former leader in the Democratic Party and the unions, you know, but my values, the values that I was carrying with me, the people that I had behind me, we had that connection. And we knew that's when we, probably about 16 years ago, and we'll get into that later as we go to our next podcast, we'll talk about the 16-year plan that we put together. We're right now probably at about year 14, year 13. We're somewhere around there because we lose track of time, right? But, you know, David, do you have a website or anything for your club, for the regional, for what it is you're doing
Well,
so
yeah,
that we can attract more grassroots candidates?
Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club.com. That's Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club.com. That's where we start there. Facebook, David Hernandez, or Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club on Facebook as well, and David Hernandez on Twitter. So we covered all of the little social media bases.
Awesome, awesome. And just so the listeners, so you guys know, this is not about, we're not trying to bash people. We're not trying to bring people down. We're just trying to talk about the elephant in the room. We're talking about the things nobody wants to talk about, you know, because these things, our gente need to know that because our gente is suffering. And when I say our gente, I don't just mean my brown skin. It's always been the people in this community, the community that we represent. I don't care what color you are, you know, what nationality, what your religious beliefs are. Good people are good people, regardless of what, you know. So David, you gave your website already?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So here's what, Maryann, any closing thoughts before we close? Because I know we're running out of time.
Yeah. One of the things I want to say really about David, I guess, is kind of everything you said. But, you know, I know there's a lot of people that think about running. They're afraid to run for office. They don't know what to do, how to go about it. And you know what? The establishment has not really been there for grassroots candidates. And now David's a person to really go to now. We have, the LAHRC, and it's open to everybody. And David is helping people run. I mean, there was 10 candidates that ran. And you know what? Half of those candidates moved on from the primary. They're going to the general. And it just really shows, you know, what you can do when you get a group of people together that understand the bigger purpose.
Common values.
Yeah, exactly. This is not about being the elitist and not about keeping control. This is about keeping our children safe, keeping, you know, food on the table, Just being able to have safe streets that our children can be on.
Well, it kind of sounds like the
Yes.
American dream,
It
right?
is the American dream, but I mean, right now it's turning into the globalist dream. It's turning into big, gigantic apartment buildings. It's turning into crime everywhere.
And we'll get
yeah.
into that in our future podcasts. We'll get more into detail, about everything that's going on. But when we talked about the American dream, we'll close with this. We always talk about these dreamers. And you know what? We are not against people coming into this country. Believe me, we've never been. You'll never hear me say that. I am not anti-union. I'm a pro-union guy, but I am anti against the corruption within the leaderships, but we welcome people to come over if they're seeking the American dream. But these open borders that we have now for generations, for let's say for at least the past 3 years, have stole actually our children's American dreams and our American dreams.
100%.
So here we've been in this country for almost 60 years, working my tail off to live the American dream for my children as well. And yet they're making 6 digits, good money, and they can't even afford to buy a house. Why? Because of all the stuff that's going on, the policies, the politics, the open borders that's taking place right now in our country. So I want to leave with this, guys. I want you to remember, because it says no more lies. Secession will hurt Latinos. Ask yourselves, who was really lying? Because all this would have done is just given more power. Had we been able to be successful with the secession movement seeking its independence, I think we would have had more local control. San Fernando Valley would have been a much better place. And for all the listeners out there, we're doing this because we want to give God the glory for what we do. We do believe that we're living in the end of the last days, and we have to wake up the people. We're concerned more about their souls than we are about what their political affiliation is. So we're trying to just share enough information to wake people up. We'll get more into the current politicians, my opponent as well, Luz Rivas. I'll share her voting record. We'll share her history, which will paint a clear picture, not only for her, but for all these politicians, of what they stand for. Maybe you agree with it. That's okay. If you agree with it, then I and the other candidates like me, we're not your guy. But if you disagree with it, you definitely have 2 choices to vote for. So I'm going to ask you guys right now, my website is bernalforcongress.com. bernalforcongress.com. Yes, we need your money, whether it be $29 for District 29 to start off with, if you can make a monthly commitment, because we are grassroots. What David's doing, what Maryann is helping with, what we're doing is we're in the grassroots campaign. I want to owe you people that donate to our campaign. The checks that come in, the money comes in, I owe you. For any politician to say they don't, no, you owe the people that gave you the money. The good thing is, it's people who we agree with, have the same values, who come from our community. So once again, bernalforcongress.com. And I really want to give a special shout out to Red Angeles for giving us this opportunity, bringing all these candidates together. I think this is big. I think what Red Angeles is doing is something it's a wave. It's a tidal wave that's going to pick up. And maybe more people will be willing to talk about the elephant in the room. So I want to thank you, David. Any closing thoughts?
Nope. Great first show, and looking forward to many more.
All right. There's a lot you need to hear that you haven't heard. We're not going to give it to you all at once because we don't have the time. So just keep in touch. You want to comment, you can comment. I do believe we're going to try to connect this so we can have a Zoom so we can bring some other people to be part of the conversation. So thank you so much, Maryann. Thank you, baby, for being here today. Thank you, Dave, for driving all the way out here to make this happen. I see a great future for all of us, regardless of party. If you're conservative, I see a great future for us. So God bless you. God bless America. Thank you so much.